Hi guys, so welcome back, and if you remember in our last video we talked about some of the early institutions of slavery, how things like the cotton gin helped revolutionize southern agricultural means and moved it away from a system of growing tobacco and rice and more into cotton, and how because of that you get an expansion of slavery throughout the United States, and that even is going to start to be a political issue as we start to add new states into the Union. And remember, that leads to the creation of Missouri as a slave state and Maine as a free state in what was known as the Missouri Compromise. And so in your notes today, you need to add this in as Prelude to War Part 2. And today we're going to talk about kind of what were the systems of slavery, how was it designed, how was it laid out, and really what is going to happen because of those systems. And so just a bit of review, but if you remember in our last video, we talked about how there was some early opposition to slavery. It was always kind of named this peculiar institution. It was kind of a polite way to say it. As far back as 1775, even before the Declaration of Independence, many people had started to kind of push towards ending slavery. If you remember earlier when we talked about Abigail Adams was an early abolitionist. She was somebody who really spoke out against slavery. Alexander Hamilton will do the same. Many of other founders abhorred the institution of slavery, but the problem was they were afraid of the fragile, kind of delicate nature of the government holding it together. They were afraid, many of them, to do anything about it when it came to the creation of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And so many of them kind of neglected slavery, but hoped that it would eventually just kind of, work its way out of there. And for many places it had until the invention of the cotton gin. When we talk about slavery, we have to also talk about what's known as plantations. And plantations are large, big, stately homes and big farms dotted throughout the South at this time. The plantation system has a number of characteristics to it. One, you have a large plantation house, pictured like one pictured in the photo here below. It usually was nicknamed amongst those who were in bondage, was known as the big house. You had slave quarters where slaves were allowed to stay. It depended on what the quality was like, but these tended to be pretty low quality dwellings. Many people packed into the same room. Often very much nothing more than maybe dirt floors. If they did have a floor, it was often a wood floor, but it was not something that was very well taken care of. Very little heat, and basically just kind of the basic living needs to get by. No fancy kind of living here. All right. Plantations tended to be more independent than regular farms, and what I mean by that is that often they didn't have to rely on other goods or other services to make their needs. So your farm might grow cotton, yes, but you probably have a blacksmith, you have a horseshoer, you have a baker, you might have cooks on staff, right? You're basically your own self-sufficient city in a lot of ways. Whereas regular farms, you have your farmer who's tilling the land and working the crops, but still has to go to town to buy the goods and services they need, right? You also would have overseers, and these are people who often are white overseers. Maybe there's somebody who works for you. They're probably not part of your family. They maybe work on the plantation, and their job is to make sure that your slaves are working or doing the job that you have asked them to do. And oftentimes they were allowed to use any means necessary. If that meant whipping or beating, if that meant taking extreme measures to get this job done, that's what they would do. Now, in addition to the plantation system, you also have what is known as the gang system, which would often be a team of workers who would be kind of contracted out to go and work somewhere. They usually rotated through different fields. They did different jobs. Even on plantation systems, sometimes you would have gang systems, or you would have workers who were slaves who were kind of hired out for the day. Maybe you had a slave who was a very good blacksmith, for instance, and they would be hired out to local farms to go and work on those farms. So it doesn't mean that just because you have one system, you can't have both, but those were kind of the two main systems of slavery. Now, one other group that we haven't really talked about are domestic slaves, and these people often worked in the big house. They were maybe your cooks, your nannies, the people who clean your house, right? They often looked after your children, and as a result, many of them got names. Things like uncle or aunt, right? So you might say, my uncle so-and-so, right? And that was the house slave who maybe took care of you. Some of this is also kind of carried over into popular culture. For instance, Uncle Ben's rice, right? Or Aunt Jemima's maple syrup. The first spokesperson actually for Aunt Jemima's maple syrup was actually a former slave who had worked in a home, and she was hired by a marketing company to appear in ads in the early 1900s. And so some of this we still carry with us today, and they're pretty controversial about whether or not we still use these terms, and should we still have these examples in our popular culture. In class, we'll actually look at more of kind of these the holdovers from a bygone era of advertising that maybe are not quite so politically correct, for instance. Now, when it comes to the slaves themselves, there is not always this just desire and will to work. As you can imagine, you have been plucked from your family, from the world that you know, and been shipped on a boat across the sea and plopped into somebody else's home and said, now work. And if you don't work, bad things can happen to you. And so for many slaves, there was kind of a few different ideas of how you did your work, ways that you could kind of resist and push back against this institution. One was known as soldiering, and what that meant was you basically did just enough work to not draw attention that you were kind of not doing any work, and so they would keep you from being beaten or being mistreated, and so you did just enough. Another way was through sabotage. Maybe you would mess with the equipment and intentionally break things. And most of the time for this one, it's very covert kind of things. You're going to, maybe not, if you're a blacksmith, for instance, and you're putting shoes on a horse, maybe you're not going to do a thorough job, so that way that horse will throw a shoe, and then that horse will be out of work, and then you won't be able to work as much. Or maybe farm implements will disappear, rakes and hoes and things like that, right? Maybe those things will disappear. That's the way you could sabotage your plantation life. Now, another way that you could kind of push back against this system was simply running away, and this is a pretty popular way of doing things at the time. Farms and plantations rarely have giant fenced walls around them, so it is kind of the overseer and the plantation owner's job to kind of keep an eye on, make sure you don't run away. And so for many slaves, they saw this as a viable opportunity to freedom. They were often would run away in the middle of the night when they knew the grounds fairly well. They also developed what is known as the Underground Railroad, which we will talk about later, where it was a kind of a system for helping slaves escape the South and into the North. One of the peculiar jobs that opens up after slaves begin to run away is actually the job of a slave chaser. That person's job is to go out, catch you, and bring you back. The reason why they do this is because losing a slave is actually really expensive to the slave masters. If you can imagine, you've spent money on this person, you've trained them how to do this job, and now they run away. Now, if you don't go get them and bring them back, then you have to start the whole system over again. You have to go out, buy somebody else, train them to do the job, and do all these things, right? In some instances, and this is often pretty gruesome, there is punishment that goes along with it. Beatings, like the picture I showed you earlier where the man was covered with scars on his back. They might cut off a foot or a toe to teach you a lesson. They might even, like in the picture down here, use some kind of torture method where you have a collar on that's hooked to your foot so that you keep your foot, but when you're not working, you're basically confined to having only one leg. One final way that many slaves could push back against the system was simply to rebel. And there's a number of slave rebellions throughout the South leading up to the war, but none of them are probably more popular or well known than what happened in 1831 in Virginia by Nat Turner. And if you've seen the recent movie Birth of the Nation that came out, it's kind of, they've taken that name of the W.D.E. Griffith movie that was quite controversial in the 1920s. They've kind of taken that name and repropagated it, right? But it's about the slave rebellion in Virginia. We're actually going to talk about that in our next video, so I just want you to kind of have that information there. We'll go much more in depth of why that was so important too. Okay, so that's it. That's all you need. So make sure you have all of this information in your notebook. Again, fill out your Cornell notes. Make sure they look really good. Make sure you have everything in there that you need. If you have any questions, let's talk about them tomorrow in class. But for now, just remember that as this system is moving along, you're creating more controversy, because just like when slaves start to escape and slave catchers come into existence and they're becoming more popular, it's going to anger a lot of abolitionists in the North who feel like, listen, if you get to the North, you shouldn't be dragged back into slavery. You are in free territory, and that's going to create problems, and we're actually going to have court cases and a lot of controversy over that same issue. But until then, have a great rest of your day, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye, everybody.